The dense forest was alive with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant bird calls as the golden hues of the setting sun painted the treetops. Deep within the untamed wilderness, where survival meant everything, a lone bear cub wandered, unaware of the danger that lurked in the shadows. This was no ordinary day in the wild. The cub, barely a few months old, had strayed too far from its mother, lured by the sweet scent of berries growing near a fallen log. It was an innocent mistake, but in the ruthless world of predators and prey, mistakes often had deadly consequences. From the tree lean, a pair of piercing eyes tracked its every movement. Then another, and another. A pack of wolves, their sleek bodies nearly invisible against the underbrush, had been stalking the cub for minutes, perhaps longer. Their predatory instincts had kicked in the moment they spotted the vulnerable young bear. The cub, oblivious to its impending doom, pawed at the ground, snuffling at the juicy berries. It was only when the wind shifted that it sensed something was wrong. The scent of danger filled its tiny nostrils. It looked up, its dark eyes wide with fear. Then came a first growl, low, menacing. A single wolf emerged from the shadows, its ears pinned back, teeth bared. The cub stumbled backward, letting out a high-pitched cry, an instinctive call for its mother, who was nowhere in sight. The other wolves appeared one by one, circling their prey, their breath fogging in the cool evening air. The little bear tried to stand its ground, but it was no match for a pack of skilled hunters. One wolf lunged forward, snapping at the cub's hind leg. Another followed, ready to strike. The cub squealed, swiping clumsily with its small paws. But it was too weak, too inexperienced. This was the end, or so it seemed. Just as the wolves prepared for their final attack, a deep, guttural roar shattered the tension. It wasn't the cub's mother, but something equally unexpected. From the thick foliage, a massive figure emerged. The wolves hesitated, their hackles raised, as the newcomer stepped into the clearing. Who? No. What? Had come to the cub's rescue. What happened next was something no one could have predicted. The wolves froze in place, their golden eyes reflecting the fading light as they sized up the intruder. A moose, tall, imposing, and utterly unexpected, stood between them and their defenseless prey. It wasn't just any moose. It was a towering bull, his massive antlers stretching wide like the branches of an ancient tree. His dark, coarse fur bristled as he snorted, nostrils flaring. This was unheard of. Wolves and moose had been enemies for centuries. The wolves had taken down calves, and in return, moose had crushed their predators beneath their powerful hooves. Yet here stood this giant, not fleeing from the pack, not protecting his own kind, but standing his ground for a bear cub, a species that had nothing to do with him. The wolves weren't fools. They knew better than to rush into a battle with a creature that could end them with a single kick. But hunger was a cruel master, and their hesitation lasted only seconds. The lead wolf, a scarred veteran with years of experience, snarled and took a step forward, testing the moose's resolve. The moose didn't flinch. Instead, he let out a deep, guttural sound that rumbled through the trees. He stomped the ground once, twice, sending dirt flying. It was a warning, a final chance for the wolves to retreat. But desperation makes even the wise reckless. The leader growled again, and the pack moved as one, spreading out, flanking the moose like shadows in the night. They knew his strength was in his antlers and front hooves. The real kill would come from behind. The first wolf darted in from the left, snapping at the moose's leg, trying to distract him. Another followed from the right. The moose turned sharply, swinging his massive rack like a battering ram. One wolf yelped as it barely dodged the deadly strike. Then came the real attack. The lead wolf lunged for the moose's hindquarters, teeth flashing in the dim light. But the moose was faster. With a powerful kick, his hoof connected with the wolf's rib cage, sending the predator tumbling through the underbrush with a pained yelp. The others hesitated, their confidence shaken. The bear cub, still frozen in place, whimpered. It didn't understand what was happening, but it sensed that this towering creature was its only hope. It stayed close, pressing its small body against the moose's powerful legs, as if seeking shelter in his shadow. The wolves regrouped, snarling, their breath misting in the cooling air. They had lost one of their own, but the night was young, and hunger was still gnawing at their bellies. They circled again, more cautious this time. Then, in an instant, the moose charged. It was a rare sight in the wild, to see a creature usually known for its calm, lumbering nature explode with such force. He barreled forward, hooves pounding the earth like thunder. The wolves scattered, dodging his wrath, but one wasn't quick enough. The moose's antlers caught its side, flipping it through the air before it landed hard against a fallen log. It didn't get up. The pack's confidence crumbled. 2 wounded, 1 dead. The odds had changed. The moose stood tall, snorting heavily, his body heaving with exertion. His message was clear. This was no easy meal. The leader of the pack let out a final growl, but it lacked the fire from before. He glanced at his fallen packmates, then at the giants standing between them and their prize. The cost was too high. With a reluctant snarl, the wolves turned and slunk back into the darkness of the forest. Their glowing eyes flickered in the shadows before disappearing completely. The moose stood still, ears twitching, waiting to make sure they were truly gone. Then silence. The cub let out a soft, shaky sound, somewhere between a cry and a sigh. It looked up at the moose with wide, uncertain eyes. The moose, breathing heavily, lowered his head slightly. For a moment, the two just stood there, one small and trembling, the other towering and unshaken. And then the moose turned. Slowly, he walked away, back into the safety of the trees. He had done what no one would have expected. He had saved a creature that wasn't his own. He had defied the laws of nature. The bear cub remained still for a few seconds, watching him go. Then, as if sensing that the danger had truly passed, it let out a small, relieved grunt and scampered away into the undergrowth, toward the distant sound of its mother's calls. The forest was still once more, but the memory of what had happened that night would linger in the shadows. The tale of the moose who chose to be a protector, rather than a bystander. As the night deepened, the forest remained eerily silent. The moose, now alone, stood in the clearing, his nostrils flaring as he absorbed the lingering scent of the wolves. His body ached from the confrontation, but something else gnawed at him. Something deeper, something unexplainable. Why had he intervened? Instinct dictated he should have ignored the cub's plight and moved on, as moose did not interfere with the struggles of other creatures. Yet, something had pulled him forward, urging him to stand his ground against the wolves. It was more than just the sight of helplessness. It was as though he had felt the cub's fear as his own. The moose turned his massive head toward the direction where the cub had fled. His mind, though not human, seemed to be piecing together something beyond reason. Had he known the cub before? Could animals hold on to memories they didn't understand? A flicker of something buried deep within his instincts told him that this was not their first meeting. A chilling wind whispered through the trees, and the moose shivered, not from the cold, but from an unsettling awareness creeping over him. His muscles tensed as a strange presence settled around the clearing. The wolves were gone, but he was not alone. Shadows moved in the underbrush, flickering at the edges of his vision. At first, they seemed like shifting branches, but then a pair of luminous eyes blinked from the darkness. Too high for a wolf, too piercing for any normal forest dweller. The moose's breath came heavier as he took a step back, his instincts screaming danger, yet curiosity tethered him to the ground. Then, from the depths of the foliage, a sound emerged. Not an animal growl, not the rustling of leaves, but something else. A voice? No, not quite. It was a vibration in the air, something felt more than heard, something ancient and knowing. The moose's ears twitched as he tried to decipher it, but the meaning remained just out of reach. Yet, deep in his bones, he understood something. The night had not merely been about the bear cub's survival. There was something larger at play, something unseen guiding the threads of fate. Had he acted of his own will, or had something, or someone, pushed him to intervene? The presence in the shadows did not move closer, nor did it retreat. It watched, silent and unreadable. And then, just as suddenly as it had arrived, it was gone. The wind shifted, the forest exhaled, and the eerie stillness lifted. The moose remained motionless for several moments, his massive chest rising and falling with each steady breath. The sensation lingered, an awareness that he had stepped into something beyond the natural order. But whatever it was not meant for him to understand. With a final glance toward the darkness, the moose turned and strode away, his steps heavy with the weight of an experience he could not explain. And somewhere, deep within the forest, unseen eyes continued to watch. The forest had never felt this alive, nor this heavy with unseen forces shifting through the trees. The moose moved with purpose now, his great hooves pressing into the damp earth, his body still humming from the strange encounter with the presence that had lingered in the shadows. Though the wolves had retreated, he sensed the night was not yet finished with him. As he pressed on through the dense foliage, the distant sound of a desperate cry pierced the silence. A cub's cry. The moose's ears flicked forward, his nostrils flaring. The bear cub he had saved was still in danger. But how? The wolves had fled. Had something worse taken their place? Driven by something greater than mere instinct, he surged forward, branches snapping beneath his massive weight. The cries grew louder, tinged with pain and panic, and as he broke through a clearing, he saw it, the cub, backed against a towering rock, and looming over it, something more terrifying than wolves. A massive black bear, larger than any predator he had faced, had the cub cornered. This was not its mother. It was a rogue male, one that did not tolerate young rivals in its territory. The bear's deep growl sent tremors through the ground, its dark eyes locked on the trembling cub. It was going to end the young one's life. A powerful rage surged through the moose. He had fought against nature's rules once tonight, and he would do it again. Without hesitation, he charged. The rogue bear barely had time to react before the moose's antlers crashed into its side, sending it stumbling backward. The cub squealed and darted away, but the moose did not relent. He drove forward, his massive rack swinging with deadly force, aiming for the bear's ribs. The bear roared in fury, swiping with its massive claws, but the moose was faster, fueled by something beyond mere strength, an unshakable will to protect. The battle raged on, the forest bearing witness to an unnatural clash. The bear lunged again, sinking its claws into the moose's flank. Pain lanced through him, but he did not falter. Instead, he reared up, his front hooves slamming down onto the bear's shoulder with a bone-crushing force. The bear let out a deep, guttural snarl and staggered backward. But the moose did not stop. With one final, earth-shaking bellow, he swung his antlers with all his might. The impact sent the bear sprawling into the underbrush. It lay still for a long moment. Then, realizing it was outmatched, it let out a frustrated grunt and retreated into the shadows, disappearing into the depths of the forest. The moose stood panting, his massive frame heaving, blood trickling from his wounds. He turned to find the bear cub, who had watched the battle unfold with wide, unblinking eyes. Slowly, cautiously, the cub stepped forward, as if drawn by an unspoken connection. The moose lowered his head slightly, the moment hanging between them, heavy with meaning. He had done what no other animal would have done. He had defied the natural order, not once but twice. And now, the cub understood something too. Then, from the distance, a familiar, powerful roar echoed through the trees, the cub's mother. The cub let out a sharp cry in response, its little body trembling with joy. The mother bear emerged from the foliage, her enormous form towering over the cub, her eyes scanning the scene. She sniffed the air, taking in the lingering scent of battle, her gaze shifting to the moose. A tense silence followed. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, the mother bear dipped her head. It was not submission, it was recognition. The moose had done what no creature should have, and in that moment, predator and prey understood one another. The cub hurried to its mother's side, nuzzling against her warm fur. The moose watched as the mother turned, leading her child away into the safety of the trees. As they vanished, he felt something shift within him, an understanding that he had changed something that night. As the wind carried away the scent of battle and the first light of dawn broke through the canopy, the moose stood alone once more, the guardian of a story no one would ever tell, but one that the forest would never forget. As dawn bathed the forest in golden light, the moose stood at the edge of the clearing, his massive form silhouetted against the waking world. The scent of the bear cub and its mother had faded into the distance, but the memory of the night's events remained etched into the very earth beneath his hooves. In the quiet that followed, the moose exhaled deeply. He had not acted out of instinct alone. Something greater had moved him, a force beyond the rules of the wild, something deeper than the laws of predator and prey. Perhaps it was a recognition of vulnerability, a moment of connection that defied the order of nature. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it was something more profound, an act of courage that transcended species. The forest had long been a place of survival, where the strong thrived and the weak perished. But that night had proven something extraordinary. Bravery was not limited to one kind. A moose, a bear cub, and even a wary mother had shared a moment that would never be spoken of, yet would be carried in the very soul of the wilderness. As the moose turned and began his slow journey deeper into the woods, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, as if the forest itself acknowledged what had transpired. He had changed something, not just for himself, but for the unseen balance of the land. There would be other nights, other dangers, and other battles. But this moment, this quiet understanding between creatures that should have been enemies, was a reminder that the natural world still held mysteries beyond comprehension. And in those mysteries, there was hope. Perhaps, deep down, every living being shared a silent bond, a recognition of life's fragility, of the unspoken need to protect one another when it mattered most. And so, the moose disappeared into the thickets, leaving behind only his hoofprints and the memory of an act that defied nature but honored something far greater, the spirit of unity in the wild.